My name is Joshua Mugabi. I welcome you to topic 3, transport in humans. We are going to look at learning outcome A, assess the role of the human heart in blood circulation and the role of hemoglobin in the transportation of gases in blood under various physiological conditions. Our learning activity, we are going to learning activity A. In groups, learners search for the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the body. Effects of different factors on the amount of oxygen in the blood. The effect of carbon dioxide concentration on the heartbeat rate. The responses of athletes versus non-athletes and lowland dwellers versus highland dwellers to exercise. Then learners will discuss, create audio-visual presentation, and share with other groups. So we are starting with transport of respiratory gases and physiological responses. Item 1. We are going to start by focusing on transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide. During a biology lesson, students examine a diagram of blood vessels carrying blood from the lungs to tissues and back to the lungs. Task. Describe how oxygen is transported in the blood. Describe how carbon dioxide is transported in the blood. State the role of hemoglobin in gas transport. Describe how oxygen is transported in the blood. Transportation of oxygen. About 98% of oxygen is transported combined with hemoglobin as oxyhemoglobin. About 2% is transported dissolved in plasma. Describe how carbon dioxide is transported in the blood. Transportation of carbon dioxide. About 70% as bicarbonate ions, that is hydrogen carbonate, in the plasma. About 23% combined with hemoglobin as carbaminohemoglobin, and about 7% dissolved in plasma. State the role of hemoglobin in gas transport. Role of hemoglobin. It combines reversibly with oxygen, buffers blood pH by binding hydrogen ions, transport carbon dioxide indirectly. Still on the transport of respiratory gases and physiological responses, item 2. We want to look at the factors affecting the amount of oxygen in blood. A patient at a clinic experiences shortness of breath at high altitude. Task: state 4 factors that affect the amount of oxygen in the blood. Explain how altitude affects oxygen content. Explain the effect of hemoglobin concentration. State 4 factors that affect the amount of oxygen in the blood. We have the partial pressure of oxygen, hemoglobin concentration, temperature, carbon dioxide concentration, and blood pH. Explain how altitude affects oxygen content. High altitude has low oxygen partial pressure. This means that less oxygen diffuses into blood, leading to lower saturation of hemoglobin. Explain the effect of hemoglobin concentration. Low hemoglobin reduces oxygen carrying capacity, results in reduced oxygen supply to tissues. We are still looking at transport of respiratory gases and the physiological responses. Item 3. We are going to focus on carbon dioxide and heartbeat rate. During vigorous exercise, a student's heartbeat rate increases rapidly. Task: explain how carbon dioxide concentration affects heartbeat rate. Identify receptors involved in detecting carbon dioxide changes. State the advantages of this response. Explain how carbon dioxide concentration affects heartbeat rate. Increased carbon dioxide forms carbonic acid. Blood pH decreases. Chemoreceptors stimulate the cardiac center. Heartbeat rate increases. Identify receptors involved in detecting carbon dioxide changes. The chemoreceptors in the carotid body, in the otic bodies, and medulla oblongata. State the advantage of this response. Faster saturation removes carbon dioxide quickly and supplies more oxygen to tissues. We are still on transport of respiratory gases and physiological responses, item 4. We're going to look at athletes versus non-athletes during exercise. Two students, one an athlete and one a non-athlete, run the same distance. The non-athlete becomes fatigued faster. Task: compare the cardiovascular responses of athletes and non-athletes during exercise. Explain why athletes recover faster. State 2 physiological adaptations in athletes. Compare the cardiovascular responses of athletes and non-athletes during exercise. Athletes have lower resting heart rate and greater stroke volume. Non-athletes have a higher heart rate and faster fatigue. Explain why athletes recover faster. Athletes have more efficient oxygen transport, faster removal of lactic acid, better aerobic respiration. Stage 2 physiological adaptation in athletes. Increased hemoglobin levels, stronger heart muscles, higher capillary density. Still looking at transport of respiratory gases and physiological responses. Item 5. Let's look at lowland versus highland dwellers. Students compare people living in lowland areas with those in highland regions, such as mountainous areas. Task: explain how high altitude living affects oxygen availability. State adaptations found in highland dwellers. Compare exercise tolerance in lowland and highland dwellers. Explain how high altitude living affects oxygen availability. High altitudes have lower oxygen pressure, and there is reduced oxygen diffusion into blood. State adaptations found in highland dwellers. High red blood cell count, increased hemoglobin concentration, larger lung capacity. Compare exercise tolerance in lowland and highland dwellers. Highland dwellers have better tolerance to low oxygen and slower fatigue at altitude. Lowland dwellers faster fatigue at high altitude. Still on transport of respiratory gases and physiological response, item 6. Let's look at an integrated exercise response. A sports coach designs training programs for different groups. Task: explain how oxygen and carbon dioxide transport supports exercise. Relate heart rate changes to gas exchange. Suggest training strategies for non-athletes. Explain how oxygen and carbon dioxide transport supports exercise. Oxygen is delivered for aerobic respiration. Carbon dioxide is removed to prevent acidosis. Relate heart rate changes to gas exchange. Increase the heart rate increases blood flow, which enhances gas exchange efficiency. Suggest training strategies for non-athletes. Gradual endurance training, altitude training, and balanced nutrition. Marking emphasis. Correctly describe gas transport mechanism. Explain physiological control of heart rate. Apply knowledge to exercise and altitude. Make clear comparison of athletes versus non-athletes, and use correct biological terminology and figures. Conclusion: efficient transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide is essential for the metabolic activity. Variation in environmental conditions and physical training lead to physiological adaptation that influence heartbeat rate, exercise tolerance, and overall performance. Thank you for participating in topic 3, transport in humans. We have been looking at learning outcome A, assess the role of the human heart in blood circulation and the role of hemoglobin in the transportation of gases in the blood under various physiological conditions. We have been looking at learning activity A. In groups, learners search for the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the body, effect of different factors on the amount of oxygen in the blood, the effect of carbon dioxide concentration on the heartbeat rate, the responses of athletes versus non-athletes, and lowland dwellers versus highland dwellers to exercises. Then learners discuss and create audiovisual presentation and share with other groups. If this has been very useful to you, visit me at Mugabi Joshua Biology on YouTube.